So I'm a carpenter by trade, and I want you to imagine that my hammer rules me.
I'm Jean Paul. This is Royse Cozzens. Today we're going to talk about debt and budgeting. So Royse, what do you mean?
Well, hammer's a tool. Your money should be a tool. It is a tool. But how many of us actually let money rule our lives? And in so many ways, you may be mentally turning me off for two reasons. One reason is, I've already got this figured out. The other reason could be,
budget.
Crap, I don't want to do a budget. I don't want to think about a budget. I already know what my problems are. But it really comes down to your money is a tool.
Yeah,
it's meant to be something that you use in order to accomplish what it is that you're supposed to accomplish here on this earth. So God's put some really, really cool things in your heart and told you, like, hey, I want you to do this, or, maybe you didn't even realize it was necessarily God, but you have these passions, these drives, these desires, these things that you want to do. And go back to the carpenter thing. Imagine if I've got this thing that I want to build and my hammer just said, no, not doing it. You can't do that. It's like,
That would be an interesting situation. It's a great way to make something like that look ridiculous. But how often do we let money be Lord instead of tool? And I was just telling you the other day how I've had this amazing year and amazing month at my job. And where I am now financially versus a year ago or 2 years ago is just incredible. And what's changed for me is the mindset and seeing how when I take authority over my money and I make it do what God has purposed in my heart, what God has called me to do, oddly enough, it doesn't take up so much of my thought space.
And there may be limitations. I mean, there are practical things where it's like my hammer, I may have a pretty great hammer. I remember this particular 28 ounce I really loved, big old hammer. But even that 28 ounce, there are still limitations. There are things that it couldn't do. And maybe with your current finances, there may be limitations.
Absolutely.
And that's fine. But to basically rule your tool is important. So, when I went to go learn to use a hammer, everybody thinks it's super intuitive, and that's great, but there are things that a master carpenter can teach you about your hammer that will actually blow your mind. It's super fun.
Well, I've got a 10-year-old, and I'm teaching him how to use a hammer. In fact, we spent a whole Saturday recently building a birdhouse, and just getting him to handle, to hold the thing properly. It's a hammer. How hard is it to hit a nail with a hammer and call it good, right? But there's a lot of nuances you learn when you wield a hammer for 8 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Yeah, and finance, yes, there's going to be some effort involved, and the crummy part is it's just work that you have to put in order to manage your finances.
Absolutely.
So what does Scripture say? We're talking about debt and budget. What's Scripture say about debt?
Yeah. Well, I did a little bit of research on that. Nothing super in depth, but as I'm reading these verses, and you have to kind of look at different keywords, right? It's not just going to say debt good or debt bad. You got to look at, what does it say about borrowing? What does it say about lending? What does it say about being a borrower versus being a lender? So in Proverbs 22:7, we see it saying that borrower is servant to the lender, and that's clearly not a good thing. There's a whole book in Exodus about being set free from slavery. And so, looking at some other verses, Romans 13:7 and 8, it talks a lot about owing no man anything but love. Some people have taken that to mean debt should never even be a part of our lives. Others say, well, no, it's not saying never be in debt. It just means pay your debts as you go along. There's a couple of different takes on it, but essentially, look at Matthew 6:12. Forgive me my debts as I forgive those, my debtors, or those who owe me. I put that wrong. I didn't write down the exact verse. It's Matthew 6:12. But essentially, the impression you get from Scripture is that debt's a bad thing.
Yeah.
That's the overall feeling is, hey, this is going to limit you. Mm-hmm. It's going to limit your options.
Right.
And I think that's the big thing to take away when it comes to thinking about borrowing.
Thinking about debt and budgeting, the person that comes to mind that I would say more or less trained me or gave me the best foundation is a guy named Dave Ramsey. Mm-hmm. If you are in a situation where you don't fully understand finances, and I would say that's got to be like 99% of us,
right?
And I'm still learning. But check out RamseySolutions.com. Dave Ramsey is just an incredible resource. Actually, a lot of churches have been doing his class. What's his class called?
He calls his class Financial Peace University. Yeah. And I highly recommend it. No matter what you think you do or don't know about finances, if you're in a situation where it's just freaking overwhelming, mm-hmm. right? Just having somebody who can speak with a clear voice, give you a clear path with literal baby steps is his thing. To take, to get out of that situation, to create breathing room in your life and begin to wield those finances like the finely crafted tool that they should be in your hands.
Well, and then the whole concept is financial peace.
Yes.
That's where he goes with it. And why you brought him up was because he constantly talks about this proverb where it says something to the effect of if you find yourself in debt, run away from it as a gazelle runs away from a cheetah. I mean, there's like this beautiful word picture there where it's like, all right, if I wake up in the morning or in this moment, you're waking up realizing that, hey, debt's not actually a great thing. We in America have been sold this, bill of goods where we wake up every morning and we go to work to pay somebody that we owe for the truck, for the car, for the house, for the, this and that and the braces and the credit card and all these other things. Yeah. And we sit here and we go, I'm the master of my finances. Really? I don't want to be too harsh, but really?
Yeah, I literally remember waking up one day and going, oh my gosh, my finances are going backwards.
Right.
I owe more rather than having more mm-hmm. in order to be able to do things. And I saw my future narrowing, my options being reduced.
Yeah.
And that's when I picked up that book, Financial Peace University by Dave Ramsey, and it changed my mind.
I love some of the questions about debt where it's like people go, how can you afford a car? And the person who doesn't live in debt and lives in this whole completely different mindset goes, you pay an extra X number of dollars, percent or whatever it is for your car. How can you afford to go into debt for it?
Right.
It doesn't make sense. If I set the money aside ahead of time and I'm actually gaining interest on that, if that's how you want to do that, mm-hmm. the car costs less. And we haven't even got into amortization. If you want to throw up, look up amortization. Like, it'll blow your mind.
Hey, some of us think that's fun.
Okay, amortization, really quick, is let's say you buy a house and you've got a 30-year mortgage on the house. How many people basically bought their first house and paid it off and did the 30 years and never bought another house in that whole time? Probably a pretty small percentage. Most people buy a starter home, and then they buy a bigger home, and then the kids move out, and then they buy a home that they can retire in. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what amortization does is it says, all right, I'm the lender. I'm going to loan you this. Let's just use $100,000. I'm going to loan you this $100,000, but I want most of my interest on the front end of the loan. Yeah. Why is that? Well, because I'm going to give you a sweet rate. I'm going to give you like 4% or something like that rate. But I know there's a really high probability that you're going to sell your house in 7 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. So if I can collect the majority of my interest in the first 7 to 10 years, we're going to call it amortization, then I got mine, and you could do whatever you want to do,
right.
And I made way more than 4%.
Oh, is that how they make their money?
It's legal to amortize loans on your house, on your cars, all that stuff. So, this is just something to look into if you're ever interested.
Absolutely. No, that's a great, nice little tip there. Some of us don't know about that kind of thing, and it's good to go, oh, maybe I should read a little more about that.
Yeah.
In the information age, it's not that hard to type something into a search engine and learn a little bit.
So, what about going into debt on a house? We're reading all these scriptures about don't go into debt. Do you have any suggestions, ideas? What's your take?
As far as I've gotten with it is that debt in general is bad, but it's not listed as a sin. Right. So we've talked before about this concept of how much money is too much money.
Yeah.
And it's however much it takes before you stop trusting God and you trust in the money.
Yeah, if all of a sudden I wake up tomorrow and I'm a millionaire and now I don't need to trust God anymore, that much money was too much
that
money.
might be too much money, yeah.
But if $1,000 will do it, $1,000 might be too much money.
Hey, $10 so I can go get my next drink, I'm good. It's not really about the amount. It's back to that whole mindset and beliefs concept.
So you're kind of touching on what we've talked about before about peace. I got a loan for my house. I know you got a loan for your house. And so there was an element. I remember we were looking at this scripture and we were going, okay, how does this actually work? So I felt like there's more peace currently in owning a house and having that stability, as opposed to somebody being able to kick me out after a lease or jack my rates up, or my what do you call it, rent, or any of that kind of stuff. And so there was more stability and more peace in that situation, owning that. However, the goal being to get out of debt as quickly as possible and not refi every 3 years and reset my 30-year mortgage or
limits,
whatever.
Right?
Yeah.
You have this mindset where we're going this far, no more, and you're paying it off.
And no, I didn't say refinance was bad.
No, please don't take any of. It's you got to be led. You got to use wisdom and discernment and all of this. But what I was thinking is, my take on it was more of a stewardship thing.
Right. That's great.
It was that, wow, okay, I've been living in this house, paying rent on time every month for 10 years, right? And what do I have to show for it? The landlord could turn around and kick me out at any moment.
Yeah.
And so stepping into owning my house.
You could have had most of your amortization.
Right? I could have had all that paid off. Yeah. And, that's one of the other things that I found when I was looking up scriptures for this, was that borrowing in general is thrown in a negative light. And I say it that way in particular because, like we already said, it's not said, this is one of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not go into debt. Right? It's kind of back to that whole money's a tool and what's your mindset going into it. But some of the other things that I came up with, number one being that trust is a very positive thing, right? And so when we look at Matthew 6:33, where it talks about seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And it's talking about, food and clothing and housing, these things that other elements of nature, animals, plants, they don't worry about, right? God's trustworthy, okay? And so oftentimes, when we're just charging it on the credit card just because we want it now, we're like, I got to have this thing, instead of trusting God, making those wise choices and trusting that his wisdom is going to lead us into a better position. That's one of those positive themes in Scripture. And then that brought me to this concept of stewardship. And we see very specific statements in Scripture where even Jesus himself declared good stewardship as excellent.
Which that leads us right into budgeting.
Yep.
If I'm here and I'm stewarding money, because ultimately when I die, I don't take any of it with me. And when I showed up, I didn't bring any with me when I got here. It's just for a period of time, and I'm stewarding money. Man, I want to steward that well. I go back to that vision that, whatever the vision is that God's been whispering to you, there's a good chance it could take some resources.
Absolutely.
Especially if it's a vision that that's got some weight to it, or some that's gonna take a lot to accomplish.
Right.
Those resources are going to be really important. So look in Scripture and you'll see what happens to somebody who stewards what they've been given well. You're going to see that person gets entrusted with even more.
Yeah.
So God has this vision for you. He said, hey, I got this plan for you if you're willing to follow me. And I go, oh, yeah, okay, God, I'll get to that at some point. Or maybe you're like, yes, I'm all in, but I'm not going to manage what I have well. That's going to be really difficult to achieve.
Yeah, so a budget is like step one, in a sense, right? I mean, it's a very basic, rudimentary way to begin stewarding, and it's that taking of authority over this tool, these resources God's put in your hands, and going, how am I going to maximize the impact? And, I didn't look the Scripture up, but there's Scripture that says God gives bread for the eater and seed for the sower. Yeah. So one of the cool things about trusting God and stewarding his resources is that when you're doing a good job, there's always enough for you to eat as well. You never have to worry, because God is he's He's not El Cheapo, right? Yeah. He loves to bless his kids, and he loves it when we're doing a good job of stewardship. And so there's always more than enough. I think that's one of the things that I had to overcome is this idea of, yeah, but if I do this thing for God, then what's going to be left over for me and my family? And I mean, that was a big breakthrough moment. It's like, kind of like you said, I came in with nothing, I left with nothing. All right. Is God trustworthy? I mean, we're talking about the guy who literally formed our entire existence with his words.
Let's just take oxygen.
Right.
He didn't make just enough oxygen for you to make it.
Don't take that extra breath. I need it.
It's bountiful. He's very bountiful person.
Yeah.
But then there's the opposite side of that coin. Not opposite necessarily, almost just in our perspective, in our stewardship. Sometimes we sit here and we'll say, oh, well, I'm entitled to blessing and this and that, and so I'm going to live like that, even though my finances are here. I do want to say there are moments where being practical is the right thing to do, where we do need to live within our budget, and we need to, make sure that our lifestyle is such that there is excess for other people and other good works and other things that we want to accomplish in life. And then there are going to be those moments where God says, hey, I want you to step out and do this, even though it doesn't look like it's possible. Right. So, I would definitely, as we're talking about budget and finances, it's very practical. Check out Dave Ramsey. Really, really, it changed my life. I think it had a huge impact on how you deal with your finances. Check out what Scripture actually has to say. Go pray. Go talk to God. And these aren't meant to be something to where it's like, okay, hey, I watched a 15-minute video and I got this. This could take years. And Dave Ramsey talks about baby steps.
Yeah. Baby steps.
So, yeah.
All right.
Anything else you got?
Well, there's something I want to throw out here because I'm reading about stewardship, and I see these places where, like in Luke 19 and Matthew 25, Jesus is the people in his parables are commending people with good stewardship. Okay. Just one last little mind bender to chew on.
We love mind benders.
Luke chapter 16, verses 8 and 9.
Okay.
There's a steward who's literally ripping off his master. Like he's stealing his money, living at large.
Is this the one where he's about to get fired?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Called to account, got to deal with it. And he does something and gets commended by his master for doing it, even though it involves still ripping him off.
So he's about to get fired, and he goes to all of the people that owe his master money, and he starts giving them deals, which basically cost his master more money. Yeah. And instead of getting fired when he's brought to account, his master goes, "Well done," right?
Right.
Did I get that correct?
That was what kind of threw me. I was like, this guy's the bad guy clearly in this story, and yet when he continues to rip off the master, somehow he gets this compliment.
Yeah. I think if I remember right, the wording is something like somewhere along the lines of, "Now you understand money."
Right.
Like you were sitting here being harsh before, but now you actually understand the value of money, right?
Yep.
So I remember reading that, and I felt like at one point it finally clicked for me, where it was like, here's this guy who is, basically a manager of something, and he's been so like almost just digital about everything. It's like, you owe this, and I'm going to pay you X number for this, and everything's just transactional. It's just ones and zeros in his head, and it's almost like his boss has been trying to get him to understand the relationships of what he was doing, and that money has a huge effect on relationships. Yeah. And I remember realizing that as I was managing a group of people, and when I grew up in the trades, they didn't have snacks and free coffee and all. I mean, it's like you brought your sandwich, and if you had hot coffee, it's because you put it in a thermos.
Yep. I mean, exactly.
And now it was like I was sitting here thinking, like, why is the client spending all this money on snacks and stuff? And I was reading that, and all of a sudden it clicked. I was like, man, you can use resources to affect not only just like what you get, but how well somebody wants to do for you, and they want to work for you. They want to be there.
Yeah. there's so many different directions we could go with the conversation, but the thing I wanted to highlight just to close this out is that God's kingdom is about people and relationships.
Right.
And when we're talking about money as a tool, finances and any kind of research, I mean, it doesn't have to be actual money, right? It can be the car or cars that you have. It can be any resources God's put in your hands. Furthering his kingdom by impacting relationships is really the key there, and that's part of what makes looking at that particular piece of scripture and so many others so much fun.
Yeah, which brings us right back to, is your blessing really for you?
Exactly.
I love it.
All right, guys, thanks for hanging with us this time. We'll see you on the next video.